On this episode of the Think Wildlife podcast, I am joined by Trishala Ashok, a conservation filmmaker and the founder of True Story Media Production LLP. We talk about the role conservation filmmaking has in supporting wildlife. We also talk about the opportunities and challenges of this field in India. Lastly, we briefly talk about her documentary made in partnership with the Gauri Conservation Program, who is also a guest on our podcast in this season. I hope you enjoyed this episode. To the podcast, it's a pleasure to have you on today. What motivated you to change from a former jewelry designer to a conservation filmmaker and science communicator?
I was always passionate about wildlife and animals, but unfortunately, growing up, I didn't have much interest in science. I was average at academics, so I never considered a career in the field of wildlife science. I was like, oh no, this is too much math, or I don't like chemistry. And I still feel this way about these subjects though. So I was always a very creative person. I love to create, like whatever it was, whether if it was craft or writing or making jewelry. I just love to create. I enjoyed it and I still enjoy it. So, which is why jewelry designing as a career made more sense to me. And I was very good at it. I used to make jewelry and sell jewelry in college to earn some, extra pocket money and stuff like that. So after my bachelor's, I went to Gemological Institute of America in Carlsbad, California, to study CAD designing and 3D printing. And back then, 3D printers to create jewelry was very new to the market. So this was a very, very great skill to learn and, have in this industry. So I came back to Bangalore and I started my own company. I did great. I got featured in a lot of magazines and newspapers. I won awards for my designs. And as a businesswoman, I was very, very happy. But I still felt like dead inside. I felt like, I don't know, my life had no meaning or something. So my calling came when I saw my first tiger in the wild. And it was in Jim Corbett National Park. This was the turning point of my life. I came back to Bangalore and I went back to work, sat down to design, and I just wasn't inspired or motivated anymore. And spending time in the industry, I witnessed the impact gold and diamond and gemstone mining had on the environment. And I didn't want to do anything with this industry anymore. I wanted to be the one saving the environment, not destroying it. So after investing 5 years in the jewelry industry and disappointing my parents, I quit. I had no plan, no career, nothing. I just quit. I wanted to do something with wildlife. That's all I knew, that I wanted to do something with wildlife. So back then there weren't many opportunities. So I started looking for opportunities. I started off with wildlife rescues, and I rescued mostly black kites, lorises, and monkeys. I even assisted in snake rescues. So I worked with wildlife rescue NGOs and rehab centers in Bangalore, and with Wildlife Crime Control Bureau and Karnataka Forest Department. I did a lot of cases, investigating on wildlife trade with Wildlife Crime Control Bureau and investigation officers. So I learned so much about wildlife trade and urban wildlife rescues, especially snakes. So along with rescues, I also used to volunteer with NGOs in conducting awareness workshops for schools and colleges in many parts of Karnataka. So I would say this was the point where, in my life, where the storyteller in me was born. I loved speaking to people about wildlife, especially children. I loved sharing my knowledge with them. And interacting with people also opened my eyes and revealed how misunderstood our wildlife was, especially snakes. We were often asked questions during rescues like, hey, can we give snakes milk? Or, how do we know if the snake has a nagamani in its head? Or can we use a snake stone to extract snake venom if we've been bitten? So these myths and misconceptions. So I came across like staged videos on YouTube, where snakes were being killed for like this myth, which is like, cobras are believed to have nagamani in their head. So people would stage these videos. You can actually Google, these videos. I mean, YouTube these videos, and you'll still see them. They'll put a sitafal seed inside the cobra's head, and then like do a video of like extracting this, the seed and saying it's a snake's drone and selling it for a lot of money and stuff like that. I came across such videos, and I just couldn't like turn a blind eye towards this issue. Like I felt compelled to like do something. So in 2018, I reached out to a filmmaker friend of mine, Abhilash Krishna, and with the idea of creating an awareness film for World Snake Day to debunk these myths and misconceptions that, were around snakes. He loved the idea and he agreed to help. Now, since snakes are protected under the Wildlife Protection Act, we had to approach the Forest Department for permits. And to our surprise, Sridhar Punati, the principal chief conservator of forests of that time, not only granted us permits, but agreed to fund the documentary because he really liked the idea. And, so which was very like shocking because, there are people who are still trying to go to the forest department and try to get their project funded. So this was literally beginner's luck, So, we went to him and he's like, oh, don't worry, here are the permits and, here's, we're going to fund your film as well. So this project marked the beginning of my filmmaking journey. So my first ever film was to co-create and present this documentary for the Karnataka Forest Department. And I also am in the documentary, like presenting it. The film is on YouTube. It's called DEFANG. You can please watch it. It's on Kalinga Center for Rainforest Ecology's YouTube page. So you can watch it there. And so I guess, in the end, it's kind of safe to say that my love for creativity and passion for wildlife science came together and made me a conservation filmmaker and wildlife science communicator that I am today.
So, what role do you think filmmaking has in conservation?
I think filmmaking is honestly one of the best tools in conservation communication. Now, who doesn't love stories, right? We all love stories. We all love to be entertained. And films and stories, I believe, do have the power to change people's perceptions. Now, I want to share a few instances from my experience, which kind of like, support this statement. So the Karnataka Forest Department, after defanged, they were really happy and they wanted us to, create a public service announcement informing the public about the importance of snakes, and they wanted us to put a snake rescue helpline number in the film. This was very exciting for me because they wanted the PSA to be in Canada, which meant, we could reach a wide audience across Karnataka with this PSA. And, which is why my team and I envisioned, creating this short and engaging story where this little boy in this village sees a cobra entering his home, and he quickly closes the door and he runs to Gauri, Gauri Shankar, who's a renowned herpetologist who happens to be working there. So he goes to him and tells him, hey, a snake has entered my home. And then Gauri goes with him to the house and rescues the snake, and then he educates the boy on, why snakes should be conserved. So this whole film is there on YouTube, and which we'll be sharing the link to. So yeah, please do watch the video and do share the video. And, it has a snake rescue helpline number as well. So please do share the video if possible. Now, this film holds a very special place in my heart because it showed me how storytelling has the power to change people's perception. Now, from the pre-production stage to the production stage, the people from this small village in Kolar were instrumental in helping us with logistics. They even helped us in digging a fake burrow for the snake, for us to get that GoPro shot of the snake being in the burrow. And, they did location scouting with us, cooking food for us, making sure we never went hungry during filming. The trust that we had established with this community was absolutely incredible. Like a family even lent their house, for the entire snake rescue sequence, showing immense faith in us, allowing our team to film a cobra in their home. So that was the kind of trust we had established with them. So, but that is not even the best part yet. Like when the film was ready, we had the screening in their village, and the villagers were extreme. The communities were like really proud. You know, they felt like it was their film too. And but my favorite moment from this entire experience was when I returned to the village a year later. The kids came running to greet me and they wanted to show me a burrow which contains snake eggs. And they took me to the burrow and they told me they were all guarding it to ensure that nobody disturbed them. So, this was the proudest moment of my career as a conservation filmmaker because I witnessed behavior change in this community. You know, they knew nothing about snakes or they didn't care about snakes. And now the fact that these children cared and they were guarding this, you know, burrow of a checkered keelback, and, so it really motivated me to make more such films when I saw that kind of behavior change. And this was a short film and it wasn't a documentary, right? So the concept of blending fiction with science resonated very well with the audience. The video kind of went viral and there were a lot of people sharing it on WhatsApp, and it's got a lot of views on YouTube. People were like re-uploading it on their YouTube, and there was somebody who got 1 lakh views, and we were keeping tab of all of this, and we were not even disappointed that people were like uploading it on their YouTube channel. We were like, oh my god, we're just happy it's reaching many people. So I noticed that, because the film it had a blend of fiction and fictional storytelling and, and science, it went very well. So, I approached my next film, Girwa Ke Garyal, for the Uttar Pradesh Forest Department and Conservation Leadership Program with a similar approach. So for this short film, the Garyal Conservation Foundation team and we wanted to highlight local talent. So we visited a school in Bardia village, which is near the India-Nepal border. And there we found our 2 characters, Renu Singh and Irfan, and Gulam Rasool, who works for the Forest Department and the Garyal Conservation team. He is also a lead character in this film, and he was a perfect person to kind of educate these kids in our story. So, as a conservation storyteller, I always like to design my films keeping my audience in mind because I want them to not just take in the knowledge, but also be entertained. Because I feel that's the best way to communicate science, right? So, since this film was used, the department told us that they want to use it to create awareness amongst the local communities. I really wanted the characters to be relatable to the audience, right? So that's the reason why I chose, Renu and Irfan and Gulam, rather than choosing like a scientist who, talks about conservation of gharials and rivers, and, which we felt like would be more relatable to the audience if these characters were there. So, it was a very rewarding experience because we learned so much from them. We learned about their way of life, their food, their culture, and they learned from us too in the process. They learned about the importance of their river and the forest, and they begin to appreciate the gharial more when they realize that, this is a critically endangered species. It's not, when we told them, oh, you're so lucky, like the gharial is found only in, in these regions. And they're like, oh wow, like, they were so fascinated. They're like, oh, they kept saying, even like hamare gharial and, hamara gharial, and they were like extremely excited that they have the species in their river, in their backyard, and they were really proud of it. So they would get excited whenever they saw the gharial. They were proud to like, just share space with this beautiful animal. And, there were dialogues from the film, which became very popular. And, if you watch the film, you will see this, like the boy calls the gharial, the male gharial, ulta gada, which means inverted pot. That's what the locals call the gharial. So every time they would see the male gharial, they'd be like, "Arey, ulta gada," and all that. So, this experience not just like, brought us all together, but it created a lasting memory. And in that process, we taught the community something, the importance of their river and the gharial. So, it was also like very well received by the Uttar Pradesh Forest Department and Dudhwa Tiger Reserve. They were extremely happy that we took the local community and put them in the story. And yeah, so we were really happy the film had created the impact that we were aiming for. So yes, I do really believe that filmmaking is honestly one of the best tools in conservation communication.
You recently founded True Story Media Productions. What is the idea behind this, and what are some of the other projects you are currently working on?
So the concept of true story is not, for me, I always believe that, in conservation filmmaking, the work starts once the story is told. The real work actually starts after the film is made, and the kind of impact that you want to drive. And so I started True Story Media Production with an idea of focusing not just on conservation issues but social issues as well. And I wanted to go beyond filmmaking. Like, the aim and the goal of True Story is to venture out into impact and have lots of impact campaigns, work with children, look at driving extremely, like positive changes, like legislative changes. And we are looking at policy changes, working with the government, working with different stakeholders, and trying to really drive that kind of impact through filmmaking and science communication. So that was the idea and goal behind True Story Media, which was honestly inspired by my own journey in conservation filmmaking and seeing that how conservation filmmaking, the kind of positive change that my films had brought. I wanted to expand that through my company. And some of the projects that I'm working on, they are really interesting. One would be the film Hidden Routes, Detecting Wildlife Crime Through Airports. So I've been working with Wildlife Crime Control Bureau and many investigation officers all for almost a decade now. And one of the issues that has been really alarming is we are noticing a rise in wildlife trade through airports, right? And so I had a brilliant opportunity while working on my film to actually document one of the cases in the airport and Bangalore International Airport. So during that time, what I did was I came back and I contemplated on doing an article for wildlife for Sanctuary Asia, because I was kind of exposing how criminals operate and trafficking happens in airports and stuff like that. So you know but during my research for my film, I came across a lot of news, over and over again, where wildlife trade and through airports is so rampant. And it's not just a threat to wildlife, it's a threat to security, people and their security as well, and airport security as well, right? And these are all entry points and exit points of the country. So they're always crowded. And, the kind of risks that can be associated if these animals escape, right? There are a lot of these bizarre stories that you probably read. Snakes on a plane is not just a movie. It's actually happening these days. There are actual snakes on planes. I've seen like this video where I came across this video where a king cobra had escaped, and the airport staff was trying to catch it with a bottle, and yeah, it was in one of the cabins and stuff like that. So seeing all of this, I realized that what my love for wildlife is far greater than my fear of exposing how the criminal underbelly works in wildlife trafficking through airports. So I went ahead and I published that article, and it received a lot of attention from people. And I got invited for a lot of talks, and I even recently had the opportunity to address 35 national customs officers about wildlife trafficking through airports. This was for NASIN, National Academy of Income Tax and Customs, which is in Palasabram, Andhra Pradesh border. So this was really exciting. So now I'm working on my film, Hidden Routes, Detecting Wildlife Crime Through Airports. And this film is not going to be for public viewing. It's going to be only for training customs officers. and making them aware about what wildlife trafficking is and how it happens and how they can detect it. Because many of them are trained to actually look for like drugs and arms and bombs, not really, trained to detect wildlife, right? So this film is going to educate them about that. So, and I'm really excited for this project. And another project that I'm working on is for Marine Mammal Research of India. And I'm somebody who's deeply, deeply passionate about marine mammals. And, this is a dream project for me because we do have whales and dolphins along the Indian coast. And there have been a lot of strandings of late. And so Dipani Sutriya and I will be collaborating on making an awareness video in Malayalam and English on educating the local communities, the fishermen and local forest department along the Indian coast, as well as the fisheries department on what to do and what not to do when marine mammal stranding happens. So it's going to be an awareness film, and I'm really excited because it's going to be in Malayalam and English. So this is one of the projects that I'm also working on. And another project that I'm also working on is on the Indian chameleon. It's amazing and a beautiful reptile that is, needs significant conservation attention. It's a dream project that I've been working on since 3 years, and we have started pre-production and it's still in the pre-production stages. So hopefully by Jan, I should be able to move on to production and the film should be out.
I've only been lucky to see a chameleon once in Ramnagar, but the stories you told about your work with officials are pretty cool. So, what have been some of the biggest challenges you have faced as a filmmaker in the conservation space?
Honestly, I think so. There are a lot of challenges that I would say, that I would face in the conservation filmmaking career. Obviously, apart from funding and permits, which are, the main problems, there are other problems that I would face in terms of, dealing with a diverse audience and, trying to, because I design my stories keeping my target audience in mind. And, so when this happens, it can really become very confusing as to how, narrowing down your story or your narrative, which is suitable for your end target audience, right? So that becomes really challenging. And, for me, I think another challenge would be, I think it's a challenge, but I would also say I find it fun because I like to challenge myself, and would be to kind of communicate science through fiction, and putting that across in your films, right? So that's a huge challenge because it's a huge risk. And, at the end of the day, you don't know how your audience is going to receive it. Like, are they going to, is it going to be received well? Now, for example, with the Girua Ke Garyal film, there were a lot of filmmakers who actually told me I was making a stupid mistake. They were like, they were like, first thing that they told me was if Forest Department has asked you to make a video, why are you investing so much of your time and effort into this? Why can't you just make a simple video and then give it to them and move on with the bigger project, which is like the bigger documentary that is going to come out soon, right? So I didn't want to do that because, whatever project it is or whoever I'm making it for, I like to make sure that they're always entertained. So when I reached out to people for advice on how I can go about this, like teaching them all these lines and shooting everything, I would sit at the editing table and be like, oh my God, am I making a big mistake? So that was one of the biggest challenges I faced because for me, it was a huge risk that I was taking, and I didn't want that 1 year of my time and other people's time that they had invested to go for a waste. So how I came across this challenge was to, and also there was another challenge that we had was lack of footage, right? So when we went there, unfortunately, like I didn't get many opportunities to film the gharial in the wild. And whenever we went there, we filmed them from the boat. The moment they would see the boat, they would just go into the water. And the water level was really low at that time. So the boat kept shaking. So I couldn't really film from the boat. So I had to do with a lot of stock footage. And we also didn't get many shots of wildlife. And, kind of like we went with the plan and nothing happened according to plan. That's the sad truth about conservation filmmaking. And, nothing goes according to your plan. So this challenge forced me to kind of do best with what little I have. And that challenged me as a creator and as a conservation filmmaker. So I had very less footage. I had advice from all my mentors saying that I'm making a stupid mistake. And, all of these self doubt and thoughts that kept creeping up and saying, oh, what, this project is going to fail, this film is going to fail. And then, there was a rut that I went through, like a creative mental block where I really felt like, oh my God, should I give up? I was actually, truth be told, coming up with excuses. I was like, should I say, I lost my hard disk, or my hard disk crashed, or, and say that, oh, I can't do this. Then I realized that, no, what, like for me, I think I should take this as a challenge and see what best I can do with this. So I worked extremely hard and, really challenged myself as a creator and as a designer, as a filmmaker. And I came up with the film. And fortunately, even though, yes, it's not of like, these quality films that you would see, it still did the job. The people who needed to see the film, who are living with the wildlife there, it reached them, and they, the film was well received by them, and they were happy. And the impact that it had made overall, even with the department, and the whole idea was very well accepted in the end. So yeah, that was a challenge, but I overcame it by just believing in myself and my project. So yeah.
So, what do you think are some very important technical skills which young conservation filmmakers should focus on developing if they want to do well in this industry?
Another challenge that I also do come across very often is, so conservation storytelling, very different from wildlife filmmaking, is all about telling the truth. It's showcasing the truth, and where you're really, you know, you're talking about conservation science, of all these researchers that have been working in the field for over a decade. So you may not have the footage to support your story. Like, how can you go back 10 years ago and film, right? And many of these researchers and scientists who have been and department who have been working on field don't actually have, they're so caught up in their work that they don't have pictures, they don't have images. So when you ask them, hey, can you give me these images, or back then, they'll be like, oh no, I don't have anything. So it's very hard to tell a story without, visuals, right? Like, I actually have an incredible story, which I will be covering in, my film, When the River Stopped Flowing, for Uttar Pradesh Forest Department. And it's about Ramesh Pandey sir, who's an IFS officer. And during the heavy floods in Girwa River in 2006, he actually used to, go in during these flood times and, take all the unhatched gharial eggs and shift it to a higher bank so it's safe from floods, right? And this is such a beautiful story. Like, how often do you think of here IFS officers who risk their life going in these flood times and rescuing, right? So I asked him, we asked him to share images, and unfortunately, he had a screenshot of a picture on his computer, which was also a screenshot. So you can only imagine the quality, right? So these are the challenges that I face as a storyteller, to kind of tell my audience about this beautiful story without any visuals. Right. So this is a big challenge that I face. So I always give an advice to NGOs and scientists who I'm working with, saying that please document everything. In the future, you'll never know when you'll need it. And also, if you cannot, like, do hire a media intern or a photographer to go with you on field and document all of this. And yeah, or else, filmmakers 10 years from like me down the line will have to, really dig deep on the internet to find images. Yeah. So, what are the key technical skills are required to become a conservation filmmaker? I would say, I think, know your equipment. Like, know your equipment inside out, like the back of your palm. That's the biggest technical skill that you should have as a conservation filmmaker, because nothing goes according to plan on field. So you don't have control over that. But what you have control over is your knowledge and your technical skills of the equipment that you have, right? How can you think fast? Like, how can you be proactive? How can you make sure you get good footage, good shots, good composition, good frame? This only happens if you have the key technical skills that will make you a good filmmaker. So, how do you get these? How do you get good at these skills? Is you practice even when there are no projects. You practice at home. You practice with things around you. You practice on the street. You practice with other subjects. So when you go on field, you know exactly what to do with your equipment, and you know exactly how to use it. So that is one key technical skill that you really need to get familiar with. And even if you're hiring or renting a camera before your field work, you know this was a rookie mistake that I used to make, and it's coming from my experience, that I would just be like, no, I'll just go on field and just, I'll figure it out and all. And I realized how much that came at the cost of me, missing my shot. Right. So what I started to do off late is, before I go, I take 2-3 days to just get very familiar with my camera. And, I make a mood board of all the kind of shots that I want, and then practice that and go very well prepared to the field. And it is important that you know your way around the camera. So keep watching. Like, these days we're blessed with so much content online. Gone are the days where we had to open manuals and check how to use something. Now we have YouTube tutorials for everything. So go on YouTube and learn from these tutorials. Keep yourself up to date about the latest software updates, and tips and tricks on how to get better at filmmaking and your camera work. So that is one technical skill, a key technical skill. And another thing I would say is, when you start off as a conservation filmmaker, make sure you know every aspect of filmmaking, right? Make sure you know how to write a script. Make sure you know how to edit. Make sure you know how to direct, how to produce, and how to film. And eventually you can outsource all of this. But these are great skills to have. And also, by expanding your knowledge and on the technical skills in filmmaking. Now, this is an advice that I got from my mentors, right? It is a tough field where, in terms of, you're not making enough money, and it's not a field really where you can earn well, right? But having these technical skills can get you many projects. Now, if you're good at script writing, you can work on, and if one of your friend is good at filmmaking, and he wants you to be he wants you to write a script, so you can get paid for that. Or if you're good at aerial videography, and if you have a drone, like, you can charge somebody for that. You can actually go with them on field. Your name will also be there in the project, and at the same time you're earning from it, right? So I would say, expand your skills and really learn as much as you can. And there are tons of online courses and master classes these days, and webinars that are there. So it's really, there are a lot of these amazing filmmaking communities like Wild Screen and Jackson Wild. So sign up, be a part of them, and they always have master classes going on. So this is a nice way, this is a nice time for you to expand your skills. And we're actually really privileged and really blessed to actually be in this time where we have so much opportunities available, because none of this was there when I was growing up. So yeah, I would say try and get as many technical skills as you can. And it can really increase your shot of making more money in this field as well.
I think that's some really good advice. And my final question is, what has been some of your most memorable, sorry, I'll repeat, sorry. What has been some of your most memorable moments from your career so far in conservation filmmaking?
In conservation filmmaking, I think it definitely would have to be this time when I was volunteering for Kalinga Center for Rainforest Ecology and Agumbe. And there was this time when the Fellis camera team had come, to film the king cobra, which was, shedding his skin. And, when they shed their skin, they like to be in the burrow, and, they're really extremely sensitive. And this happened to be in somebody's estate. And the king cobra was there for I think 3 days now. And they were really frightened. They wanted the king cobra out. And they were like, if you don't come and remove it, we're going to, kill it. And, we're going to please make sure it's it's out of there. It's out of our property. And, KCRE is honestly an amazing organization when it comes to doing conservation on snakes and building that kind of trust with the community, especially on kings and in Agumbe. So they asked me to go with the Fellis team because Fellis wanted to film the king cobra. And, if in case it comes out, they wanted some footage of the king cobra and stuff like that. So I went with the filmmaker, and every day we would sit in the morning from 9 a.m. to at least 6 in the evening. And the promise that we had also made to them that is that anything happens, we will be there and we'll make sure nothing happens, as in the, king comes home or something like that. And we'll immediately call KCRE and tell them that, hey, this is the situation. So that was the plan. So we sat there, and then we, every day waiting for the snake to come out. And, I had at least 10 to 15 tick bites because I was sitting on dry leaves and wanted to kill the king. So, yeah, so, they wanted to kill the king, and, they really didn't want the king there. But they saw how much effort that we were putting in, right? They saw that, there are these 3 people who are coming eagerly waiting for the king, and they're here to also protect us and protect the king. And they kind of saw how passionate we were, and their attitude changed. And I swear, the guy said one of the cutest things to me. He came to me and then he sat next to me. And then he said, oh my God, it's been 3 days and the king has not come out of his burrow. Do you think he's hungry? And I was like, oh my God. And he's like, do you think we should keep curd rice in front of his burrow? And, that's one of the sweetest things I've, heard, because, in India, offering curd rice and milk rice to animals shows that you care about them, right? So they actually care about the king enough to think that, oh, is he hungry? And, does he need food? Does he need curd rice? So, it still makes me very emotional when I talk about the story. So that moment, even though I didn't see the king, I left with completely satisfied with this whole experience that, our effort, the 3 of us, sitting there kind of, and where we were engaging in conversations, we were educating them about kings. We were telling them, oh, they're so fascinating. The female king cobra builds nests. And we were talking to them about that our knowledge and passion that we shared kind of rubbed off on them. And yeah, so that's one of my favorite moments.
So that was a final question I had for you today. Thank you so much for taking time out for this podcast.
No problem.